Stop for a moment. What if I told you that everything you think you know about the richest people in history is incomplete? Not slightly wrong, completely underestimated. Because before modern billionaires, before stock markets, before global corporations, there was a man in Africa whose wealth was so massive, it bent the rules of economics itself. A king who did not just own gold. He controlled entire regions where gold was treated like soil under your feet. His name was Mansa Musa. And if you think this is just another history story, you are wrong. This is the story of a man who entered history so powerfully that even today, hundreds of years later, economists still struggle to calculate what he was really worth. Now think about this. Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. We measure their wealth in billions, but Mansa Musa lived in a time where there was no billion, no modern banking system, no global currency exchange. And still, historians agree on one shocking truth. He was richer than anyone who has ever lived, not because of numbers on paper, but because he controlled something the entire world depended on: gold. And not small amounts, entire gold regions. Now imagine this. A king leaves his empire for a religious journey to Mecca. But this is not a normal journey. This is a moving empire crossing deserts, cities, and nations. Thousands of people, hundreds of camels, and every single step he takes leaves a mark on history. Because wherever he goes, he does not spend money like a king. He spends like someone who does not need to count. And that is where everything changes. In one city alone, his generosity was so extreme that the entire economy collapsed. Gold lost value, markets became unstable, and for years after, traders tried to fix what one man had done without even trying to destroy anything. Now ask yourself this: how powerful does someone have to be to change the value of gold in multiple countries just by passing through? But Mansa Musa was not just a symbol of wealth. He was a symbol of something bigger: power, influence, civilization. Because while the world remembers him for gold, the real story is what he built when he returned. Cities of knowledge, centers of learning, libraries filled with thousands of manuscripts, a place where scholars came from across the world to study. Timbuktu was not just a city. It was a global intellectual capital at a time when much of the world was still developing. So before you think this is just a story about riches, understand this. This is a story about an African empire so advanced, so wealthy, and so influential that it changed history without firing a single weapon. And by the end of this video, you will understand something most people never learn in school. Africa was never behind. It was powerful long before the modern world ever caught up. Now let's go deeper into the life of the king who proved it.
You think the richest people in history are modern billionaires? Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. Now imagine someone so wealthy that when he traveled, he didn't just move with guards. He moved with an entire city. Thousands of soldiers. Hundreds of camels. Tons of pure gold. And when he entered a foreign land, he didn't spend money. He broke the economy. This is not a legend. This is Mansa Musa, the African king whose wealth was so massive, the world could not measure it. And what you are about to hear will change how you think about African history forever. Intro. In the 14th century, while much of the world was still struggling with poverty, wars, and unstable kingdoms, there was an empire in West Africa that was sitting on something the world desired more than anything else: gold. And controlling that empire was a man named Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire. Historians often call him the richest human being who ever lived. Not one of the richest. The richest. But his story is not just about money. It is about power, influence, and how one man's journey changed global economics. Rise of Mali Empire. Before Mansa Musa, the Mali Empire was already strong. It controlled major trade routes across West Africa. Salt from the desert. Gold from deep mines. Ivory. And knowledge. But when Mansa Musa came to power, everything expanded. He did not just rule. He built. He strengthened cities like Timbuktu and Gao into centers of learning and wealth. Timbuktu was not a small town. It was one of the richest and most advanced cities in the world at that time. It had universities, libraries, scholars, and traders from across continents. While parts of Europe were still in struggle, Mali was shining with gold. And Mansa Musa controlled it all. The wealth beyond imagination. Now here is where it gets almost unreal. Mansa Musa's wealth was so large that historians cannot even calculate it in today's money. Why? Because he controlled nearly half of the world's known gold supply at that time. Gold was not just currency. It was power. And Mali had it in massive amounts. But Mansa Musa was not just sitting on wealth. He was about to make a journey that would shock the world. The Great Pilgrimage. In 1324, Mansa Musa began his famous journey to Mecca. This was not a simple trip. It was a royal expedition across the Sahara Desert. And what he brought with him became legendary. Sources describe tens of thousands of soldiers, thousands of servants, hundreds of camels, and each camel carrying gold. But what shocked everyone was not just the size of the journey. It was how he spent money along the way. In every city he passed through, he gave away gold like it had no value. He gave so much gold in Egypt that the price of gold dropped. The economy collapsed. Inflation hit hard. Think about that. One man's generosity changed the value of an entire currency system. Even years later, markets struggled to recover. People in the Middle East and North Africa were still talking about the African king who changed the price of gold. Cairo impact. When Mansa Musa reached Cairo, historians recorded something unbelievable. He gave away so much gold that it flooded the market. The value of gold dropped so sharply that it caused financial instability. To fix the damage, traders had to slowly buy back gold over years just to stabilize prices. Imagine this level of influence. Not with weapons. Not with armies. But with wealth. Legacy of Timbuktu. But Mansa Musa did not just spend wealth. He invested it. When he returned, he brought scholars, architects, and engineers from across the Muslim world. He built mosques, universities, and libraries. Timbuktu became a global center of knowledge. Books were more valuable than gold in some places. At a time when Europe was in intellectual struggle, Mali was producing scholars, scientists, and writers. Mansa Musa was not just rich. He was building civilization. The truth modern world misses. Most people today never hear this story in detail. But here's the truth. Africa was not a forgotten land in history. It was home to some of the richest, most advanced empires in the world. And Mansa Musa is proof of that. His wealth was not just personal success. It was a reflection of an entire powerful civilization. Closing. So the next time you hear richest people in history, remember this. Before modern billionaires. Before global corporations. There was an African king who could travel across continents and shake entire economies just by giving. His name was Mansa Musa. And his story is still unmatched. Before you leave this video, think about what you have just witnessed. A man born more than 700 years ago. A king from Africa. A ruler whose wealth was so enormous that even today, with all our technology, economists, historians, and financial experts cannot calculate its true value. Let that sink in. We live in a world obsessed with billionaires. We celebrate the richest people on earth. We track their fortunes every day. Yet the wealth of Mansa Musa was so vast that modern numbers struggle to contain it. But this story was never really about gold. It was about something much bigger. Because gold can be stolen. Empires can collapse. Palaces can turn to dust. But a legacy, a true legacy, can survive forever. And that is exactly what Mansa Musa created. For centuries, the world looked at Africa through the wrong lens. Many people were taught that greatness came from somewhere else. That wealth came from somewhere else. That civilization came from somewhere else. But history tells a different story. A powerful story. A story of African kingdoms that traded across continents. A story of cities filled with scholars, scientists, and visionaries. A story of empires whose influence reached far beyond their borders. And standing at the center of that story is Mansa Musa. A king who forced the world to pay attention. Not through fear. Not through conquest. Not through destruction. But through unimaginable success. Think about that. How many leaders can say they changed the economy of entire nations simply by being generous? How many rulers can claim that their journey became one of the most famous events in world history? How many people leave a legacy that still inspires the world 7 centuries later? Very few. Because Mansa Musa was not ordinary. He was a phenomenon. A symbol of what was possible when vision, leadership, and opportunity came together.